another episode of Gossip Finance, where I am your host, Alasius Inger.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. How is everybody today? How are you, Lacey?
Well, I am fabulous. I can't wait to talk about how the Republicans are screwing everything up for us yet again.
Yeah, well, it all is very financially related to all of us. So on today's episode, we're going to cover the Republicans tanked the border bill at the request of Trump in the House. A foreign aid bill just passed the Senate just the other day, Monday, right? But it's got to go to the House, so we'll see what happens there. Alan Weisselberg, who is Trump's former CFO, it looks like he's going to plead guilty to perjury and take a deal, which is going to be really bad for Trump's upcoming criminal case in March. And Trump's former lawyer, Alina Habba, who he just fired, who was the idiot that we've been making fun of for months, she basically pissed off the judge, which is great for her. And we'll do the Trump's disqualification case that was heard in the Supreme Court last week. And Tucker Carlson went to Moscow and interviewed Putin, and Putin basically treated him like a child or a spurned dog kind of thing. It was pretty bad. And we'll cover that and a little bit with what's going on in the energy markets. And then we've got some fun clips coming up. So let's go ahead and dive right in because it's just a lot of news to cover. So essentially what happened was Biden did something I thought was kind of stupid, but it is what it is. Him and the Democrats pushed a border bill because right now we do have a record number of people coming across the border, and we don't have enough money for judges or for the asylum process. And so it's been kind of, stressful, right? Because we don't really have a border strategy for how to handle the immigration, right? And Biden's been asking for money. So what he finally did, because he also wants to get aid for Ukraine for the war that they're in with Russia and the war in Israel and Gaza, to do all that, he said, okay, if you give me the aid, we'll basically do everything the Republicans have wanted to do on the border. All these really draconian, awful kind of shit that they wanted to do. But he was willing to cave on that for aid for our allies. Well, the Republicans got all excited, but Donald Trump was like, well, wait a second. I don't have any issues to run on except for to bitch about the border. So if you pass this border bill, you basically give Biden a win, and then I don't have anything to complain about for the election. So let's just let the problem get worse and metastasize so I can complain about it for the election, even though you just got everything you wanted.
So, Duncan, I know we talked about this in a previous episode, but I feel like it bears repeating. Reminder people, Trump currently is running on literally no platform. There's literally zero platform. So when Duncan says all he's trying to do is bitch about the border, it's because he literally is running on no platform. Yeah. He's just going to, throw crap out there and see what sticks.
Well, but that's all he's got right now is to say they're weak on the border. So he went to the House, and the House pretty much turned it down. We're going to look at this real quick. So this is Good Morning America. Oh, hang on. That was weird. There we go. So Good Morning America. Here we go.
We turn now to the showdown on Capitol Hill over the border and aid to Ukraine. Last night, a bipartisan group of senators unveiled a compromise bill, but the Republican Speaker of the House says it's dead on arrival. Our senior congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, has the very latest for us. Good morning, Rachel.
Lindsay, good morning to you. And this is the most significant border security and immigration deal between Democrats and Republicans in over a decade. Within just hours, House Speaker Mike Johnson made it clear it is not going anywhere in the House. This is a massive package, $118 billion. That includes $20 billion for border security, sweeping immigration restrictions, including shutting down the border when migrant encounters reach 5,000 a day, and making it more difficult to claim asylum in the U.S. $60 billion in funding for Ukraine, $14 billion in funds for Israel. The president calling it the toughest and fairest set of border reforms in decades. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell saying it provides.
So McConnell was on board. Biden was on board, even though technically, you saw it's pretty draconian. right? We're going to restrict asylum and try to cut down the number of people, and we're going to start deporting more. And I want to be fair on this one. Obama and Biden have deported more people year over year than Trump did in his entire 4 years.
Right.
And the reason that is because when the Democrats do it, they put in all the asylum claims, and these people get through the court system a little bit faster, as opposed to Trump, who cut all that and just said, we'll build a wall, which isn't going to stop them, right? And his whole thing with the wall is, well, if we make it 40 feet, then if they'll build a 40-foot ladder, but if they get up there, they can't get down. And then he was like, oh, well, maybe a rope. And I'm like, yeah, your brilliant idea was just defeated by man's third invention.
I mean, it all sounds so stupid. It's like, yeah, going back to the Middle Ages, you're like, all right, so we're just going to build this big ass wall.
Right.
And then they're not going to be able to get up it. And if they do get up it, they'll get stuck up there. Like, that's your great plan?
Yeah.
That's your great plan.
It'll keep out the Mongols, which the Great Wall of China didn't even keep out the Mongols. So anyway.
Like, this is why we study history, people. This is why we study history.
Right. So the problem is this, and we're going to kind of go over this a little bit. We were talking about this before. The Economist, if you guys don't get this, you should check it out. They wrote an article, House Republicans are helping Vladimir Putin. And that's basically what this article was about, was this whole situation. And it's basically everybody agrees that it's like, okay, by not giving aid to Ukraine right now needs weapons. They need ammunition. They need food. They need medical supplies. They're in deep trouble. Right? Because they're fighting off Russia right now. They're in a shooting war from an invading army. And if we don't give them that aid, I mean, it's possible they're going to lose a lot of ground here because they don't have the munitions to hold it. So by saying, well, we're going to hold all that up, you're basically giving our enemies a huge advantage. But it causes even bigger problems because when you break down the economics of it, this is really devastating for the world economy overall. So this also is affecting your pocketbook to a certain degree. And we're going to get more into that because that moves into round two, which is just the other day, Monday this week, the Senate again passed with bipartisan. Now, some Republicans about half the Republicans rejected it, but about half of them went with it, which was a pretty big deal. And basically it was an aid package just for Ukraine and Israel. Now, I'm not going to get into an argument right now about should we be giving money to Israel or not. I don't think so, but that's a whole nother argument. The point is they got this passed. Now it's going to the House, but it looks like the House isn't going to even consider it under Mike Johnson because he's still Trump's, little schoolboy on the Hill. So, it might be that our allies don't get aid. And this is really a bad thing. But this is the report on this. This is MSNBC. This is Joe Scarborough, and he's going to talk a little bit about this because it just makes no sense.
We begin this hour on Capitol Hill, where the Senate just voted to pass a $95 billion foreign aid bill that includes support for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. The standalone bill comes after Republicans in the upper chamber tanked a linked border security and foreign aid package last week. The bill now heads to the House, where it faces an uncertain future, to be generous. Speaker Mike Johnson says Congress needs to focus on border security before foreign aid. They already did that, but we'll put that to the side for a moment.
Well, he's got a great thing about they already did that, which is, well, we need to focus on border security. They just handed you a bill, and you said, I'm not even going to consider it because Trump doesn't want it. Trump's not even in office. He's not part of the government. And you're still doing whatever he wants.
Right.
And now you're saying, well, we need to focus on border security. You just got everything you wanted for the most part, and you turned it down because Trump wants it to be an issue. So basically what they're saying is we want to focus on this, but we don't want to do anything about it.
We want to make sure literally nothing gets done about it until Trump has managed to stand in front and use it as like his only talking point, really. for the entire election, so that he can gripe and complain that nothing has happened with it, when really the reality is the only reason something hasn't happened is because the Republicans are sort of holding everything up anyway to make it like a big election point.
Well, but that's the thing.
Basically.
But that's the thing that I think is funny about it, because what's going to end up happening is they're going to say, well, it's Biden's fault. But no, Biden gave you everything you wanted. You shot it down. And here's the deal. It's going to be who can get their message out to the independents, to the voters who care about that sort of thing, right? And as we covered last week, the Republicans don't have any money. They're broke. And the Democrats have over $100 million to throw at ads.
So
and that's just now.
The Democrats do have the ability to put the APB out on the whole thing and, spread the word, make it known. And the Republicans are kind of broke. So,
well, the news has been covering this. Fox News even covered this to an extent. So people out there know this is the Republicans' fault. So this whole thing about we're going to do this to shoot Biden, they're actually kind of shooting themselves in the foot. This is literally that you tried to draw the gun too fast while you were drunk and shot yourself in the foot. I mean, and now you're going to say, well, Biden shot me. No, he didn't.
Right.
So
no, you're the one holding the gun. He doesn't even have a gun.
Yeah, no, he's still at
he
the bar.
He handed you the gun. He handed you the gun, and then you used the gun to shoot yourself.
That's right. He's still at the bar, hitting on the cocktail waitress. He doesn't even know that you guys did this. All right, so let's go through this. They're gonna complain about this a little bit, but it's so stupid.
Here's what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said about the passage of this morning's bill just moments ago.
Today, we make Vladimir Putin regret the day he questioned America's resolve. And we make clear to others like China's President Xi not to test our determination. And we send a clear bipartisan message of resolve to our allies in NATO. With the strong bipartisan support we have here in the Senate with this vote, I believe that if Speaker Johnson brought this bill to the House floor, it will pass with the same strong bipartisan support.
All right, Joe. So 70 votes is a sizable chunk of the United States Senate passing this foreign aid bill, $95 billion, Ukraine, Israel. It'll be Gaza, humanitarian assistance, and also, of course, Taiwan and other partners in the Pacific. So what we've heard from some of the senators is that they want border security before they want to help foreign countries. They just participated in a process in the United States Senate where Republican Senator James Lankford gave them just that. And now the House says it will not pass, at least Speaker Johnson does, it will not pass this bill that just passed this morning in the Senate, because he wants border security addressed, which the Senate just did last week.
Right. Well, it's mind-boggling. You have in the United States Senate one of the most conservative senators, James Lankford, pass the toughest border security bill, or put together a bipartisan plan to pass the toughest border security bill in well over a generation, a tougher bill than Republicans could ever dream of getting in the future. And Republican senators said no because Donald Trump told them to say no. You have the Senate.
So it's all just hypocritical bullshit. He's right.
So
it's stupid.
Don't pretend you want this border security thing when you really don't really want it.
No.
It's just some sort of like pawn in some weird little chess game. However, it's such a weird pawn to use at this point because it's like literally out there like a flashing beacon that you were handed, everything you could want and more. It's like, wow, I dream of having my very own home one day. I don't need anything really big. And then you actually get handed a fucking castle, right? Instead of just like a regular house, you get handed a castle. You're like, whoa, I just got handed way more than I ever thought I could dream is possible. Oh, wait, but this guy says I better not take that. Never mind.
Right. Well, and
Forget the castle.
And it's so stupid because there's a bunch of factors here that are going in. We're not going to get into them here today. If you guys want to check out our Patreon page, I go more into this and how it's going to affect the markets, especially the international markets, because Ukraine is a breadbasket for Europe. And if you factor it in, I think it's Russia and Ukraine combined produce like 40% of the world's wheat. And now that they're at war, that's all tanked. Russia's economy's tanked. You have to remember, too, Taiwan just elected a guy who's very anti-unification with China or anything like that, or China coming in and taking over. So he's actually fighting the Chinese regime in Taiwan. And they're heavily outnumbered and gunned. So they need as much financial support as they can get if they're going to hold the line there, which is huge for us because I guarantee you look around the room you're in now, I would bet you at least 5 to 10% of the products in there made in Taiwan. Huge trading partner for us. We cannot afford to lose Taiwan. So this bill covers all these things, but they're willing to shoot the economy, right? And shoot our partners and our allies and our trading partners for this whole thing. And then, of course, the whole deal with NATO is NATO's freaking out right now because Trump tried to get out of NATO when he was president. And then just recently, this last week or weekend, he said this. Check this shit out. This is amazing to me.
No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
Former President Trump's suggestion that the U.S. would not protect NATO allies, failing to spend enough on defense, is prompting significant fallout on the world stage. He made that comment during a campaign rally on Saturday, the former president suggesting he'd encourage Russia to invade NATO countries if they don't pay toward mutual defense. The European Union.
That's not.
He's so weird.
So yeah, he just flat out. Go ahead.
It's just such a weird ass thing to do. I'm sorry. Like, it's just like, what?
Well,
what are you saying?
And specifically what he said is, I think he thinks that NATO pays us for protection. And that's not what it is. There's a sort of a loose agreement that you spend X amount of your GDP on your military. Right? And you can sit there and go, well, yeah, we provide the most, but that's not really NATO's fault. That's not really Europe's fault, or Japan or South Korea or anybody else, because as a nation, we spend more on our military budget than the next 26 or 7 nations combined on that list. We spend more than all of them combined, and like all but one of them is an ally. I mean, there's no military we can't crush easily with the amount of spending we have, except for maybe China because they have a lot more people, right? But that's the point. So he's basically telling our allies in Europe, I'm going to not protect you. I'm not going to stick to any of our old treaties, and I'm going to encourage Russia to invade, which Putin wants to do. Putin would love to invade Poland and Germany and all that. He would love that. But the bottom line is, well, now what does Europe got to do? Europe's got to sit there and go, well, shit, we got to start bulking up our weapons. Right? We got to start bulking up our military, and we can't really rely on the U.S. because if Trump becomes president, we might be at war with Russia. We might be at war with the U.S. I mean, depending on how it goes. I mean, so this is like, and then Taiwan's going to be in deep shit. Plus, he's going to want to start a trade war with China. So, I mean, the economy is going to be for fuck. We're not going to have any trading partners. Inflation's going to go through the roof. We're all going to be in deep shit. I mean, it's just, the whole thing's insane. I mean, why are you pissing on your biggest trading allies? It doesn't make any sense to me. But, yeah, I don't know what else you had to add to that, but that's kind of what's going on right now in global news. I get more into this. Check it out on Patreon. I'll get more in much more detail on what's going on and how it's going to affect markets and potentially the economy. But yeah, just it's crazy shit. But it's like, that's why. Yeah.
Gosh, America, you let him all in, and you were literally signing your own wallet up for a huge disaster.
Well, not just, I mean, all kinds of other problems. You never know. I mean,
for sure.
Yeah. He could try to use the military on us. He's tried that before. I was in Portland. They sent ICE down here to shoot rubber bullets at people and stuff. I mean, I got tear gas, and I was just walking home from work. And they're tear gassing people in drum circles. Nobody's armed. Nobody's rioting. It was the weirdest fucking thing.
They might be high as a kite and smoking a lot of weed, but they're not armed.
Well, what's funny is all these because all these people were out there protesting, but it was a lot of young people. What happened was the parents started to show up, the Gen X and the baby boomers, and they did like the wall of moms where all these women who were mothers, linked arms, and stood between the protesters and the cops so that ICE wouldn't shoot. And they still shot some of those women, with rubber bullets. And then a bunch of guys showed up with leaf blowers, like middle-aged guys with leaf blowers. And when they would launch tear gas, these guys would blow it back at the cops. I mean, that was and it's like, is it really worth the weapons? So yeah, I mean, the whole thing is fucking crazy. I mean, go with what it is, but I don't know if you had anything else to add to that. We'll move on.
No. Let's move on.
All right. Well, speaking of it, we got Trump. He's got a ton of trials coming up, but the big one coming up soon is going to be March 25th. So far, it looks like, and that's the felony fraud case in New York, and it's 31 felony charges. So what happened was they did the civil fraud case in New York, and Judge Engoron was the one who oversaw that, and Alina Habba was Trump's lawyer, and she screwed that whole thing up. And now Engoron right now is supposed to give a judgment at the end of end of January, right? Now here we are a couple of weeks into February, and he still hasn't given his answer yet. And the reason was because the independent inspector came back, and she basically said, yeah, they're still committing fraud. And they were the whole time they were in trial. And furthermore, an article came out that Alan Weisselberg, who was Trump's CFO, right, his chief financial officer, turns out he's trying to cut a deal now with Alvin Bragg, who's the criminal DA in New York. And the deal is he's going to plead to perjury so he doesn't have to do more jail time. And the perjury is because he lied in Engoron's court. So Engoron was like, well, wait a minute. He lied, so now I have to consider that in my judgment too. So I'm sure Engoron had his judgment already written out, and then all this shit happened after the trial ended, and now he's got to go, well, now that's got to factor in. So now he's got to rewrite a lot of his judgment. So Engoron basically wrote an email to both the plaintiff, the prosecuting attorney, and the defense attorney in the civil case saying, what's going on with this? Is he actually pleading? What did he lie about? What do you know?
Right.
Well, Alina Habba and her other buddy, who was the other lawyer, they emailed him back, and it did not go well. And here's Michael Popak, and he's going to talk about this on the Midas Touch, but this is just hilarious to me.
Of Cliff Robert and Alina Habba, at least Cliff Robert, for misleading the judge and for attacking him inappropriately. That could be a bar violation. But we'll put that aside for a minute. The judge continues. Arguing against judicial notice is attacking a struck person. In other words, I didn't say I was going to take notice of the New York Times article. And the judge says, I've not taken, nor do I plan to take judicial notice, and did not suggest or hint that I would take judicial notice of the New York Times article or the contents of it. Similarly, I have not taken, do not plan to take, nor have I suggested that I'm going to take the Times article into consideration in my findings of fact. I don't plan, did not plan, and didn't hint that I would invoke the legal doctrine of falsus in uno, meaning if you lie about one thing, you lie about all things, on the story. Any such invocation would be based on trial testimony and or a guilty plea. However, if tomorrow, interesting choice of timing, Mr. Weisselberg publicly confesses to having committed perjury about a significant matter in the case before me, or he pleads guilty to such perjury at any time before I issue my final decision, I will research and consider what the law allows. I take seriously my obligation to find the facts and determine the truth. To that end, and here's the admonishment, the knuckle rapping by the judge of Trump's lawyer. I find it appropriate to have reached out to counsel for Mr. Weisselberg, who is a defendant in this case, to inquire as to her, that's Alina Habba, her knowledge of this serious allegation. Indeed, Rule 3.3A3 of the ethics rules provides that if a lawyer's client offered material evidence and the lawyer comes to know of its falsity, the lawyer shall take reasonable remedial measures, including, if necessary, disclosure to the tribunal. I've done that. You step aside, you dismiss the jury, you meet with the judge in chambers with opposing counsel, and you tell them that you think your client.
So that's the rub. So the judge is saying, look, right now it's just an article. I'm not going to factor in the article. I need facts. I need actual evidence. So if he does plead to a perjury, I need to know what he's going to plead to or what he did plead to, because that's going to affect my judgment. Because right now, remember, he's sitting on barring Trump from ever doing business again in New York. And Letitia James, who's the civil DI, I guess, she asked for $370 million, but it might be higher than that now. He might be looking at $500 million. Plus, you got to remember, this goes back in New York. It goes back 6 years on the statute for limitations. So they can go back 6 years, which they'll probably do, and he has to pay 9% a year. So that if it's $500 million, it could all of a sudden be like $800 million with interest over 6 years at 9%.
800 million. Oh my gosh. That's a number that takes your breath away.
Oh yeah. Which means they'll be seizing his properties and he won't be able to do any business in New York.
So imagine that. Think about all of like what that means. Like, you can't do business in New York. 800 million means, I don't know how much of your property is seized, but probably a pretty substantial amount of it, right? I mean, and if New York won't do business with you, I mean, pull the string on that.
Well, you're not going to be able to do.
If New York wouldn't do business with somebody,
you're not going to be able to do business. Yeah, you're not going to be able to do business in the U.S. anymore. Probably not most of Europe. But what Trump has been doing is he's been trying to do more business in Saudi Arabia and in Russia. Well, if that's the case, do you really want a president who's in bed with Saudi Arabia and Russia and owes them for all of his income? Do you really want that guy running your country when he's owned by foreign governments, especially dictatorships? So that's a big issue there. The funny thing with Habba, though, is here's the deal. If Weisselberg perjured himself on the stand and it's determined that she knew he was lying, when you're an attorney, if you ask a witness, especially your witness, something that you know they're lying about, and you don't tell the judge in private or, remove yourself from the case, right? Recuse yourself, essentially. If you don't do those things, then essentially you're also guilty of lying and perjuring yourself if you don't correct it. So if I ask you, Lacey, did you see this thing happen? And you say no, and I know for a fact you did, I have to say, Your Honor, we need to speak in chambers. The witness just lied on the stand. Right? If I don't do that, I could be in trouble. I could lose my bar license. So now she's going to probably be back into the Bar Association in New York, and they're going to be going, well, hey, if you perjured yourself, we're going to pull your bar license, and you can't practice in New York ever again. Which means they'll pull it everywhere else too. But then she's also looking at the same thing where she lied to a client to try and help out Trump back in Florida. Plus, she's looking to get sanctioned from the E.G. and Carroll case, the rape defamation case, right? Because she basically threatened the judge and the other attorney after the case was over. And so she's looking at getting sanctioned for that. So whatever $3 million, $2.5 million she made from Trump, she's going to end up paying that all back in fines and So she's looking really bad right now. She was just, they're like, everybody's making fun of, like, she's the worst attorney Trump's ever had. And you're like, wow, that's saying a lot since he had Rudy Giuliani.
Man, and you know what? You do not want that being your claim to career fame right there.
Yeah, whatever career she had, it's pretty much over. I mean, she might still get some cases from some scumbags here and there, but nobody's going to pay her that much. And she's obviously proven she's incompetent, and she just makes it worse. You know, she sort of semi looks good playing to the Trump's base on TV, but that's all she's got. In court, she can't do shit. She's worthless.
I feel like she's gonna have to go the way of Better Call Saul, if anything. You know what I'm saying? Jeez.
Well, at least he was smart enough to cover up his shit. And he wouldn't have fucking done. He wouldn't have done stupid shit like this.
Yeah. He at least was a little smarter about the way he went about it.
Yep. And yeah, so that was that. Oh man, so Alina Habba, God, be glad to see her go, but I'll miss her a little bit because she's been a lot of entertainment. What was her famous line when she was on Patrick Bet-David? She said, somebody asked me, would I rather be smart or pretty? And I said, easy, pretty, because I can fake being smart. We're like, yeah, apparently you can't, Alina.
How's that working for you, lady? How's that working for you?
Not working out well. But on the other Trump shit, so the big Supreme Court thing happened this last week, where Colorado decided to disqualify Trump from the ballot. Now, the way that happened is initially the Secretary of State was looking at, should I disqualify him because he was the insurrection article under the 14th Amendment. You can't take an oath and then commit an insurrection and then hold office ever again. So that went to I think it was the district court. The district court judge said, well, no, he did commit an insurrection. He did incite insurrection. He's guilty of that, right? Right, or he's liable for that, whatever. But the thing about it is she was like, I don't know that I can pull him off the ballot. So she kind of punted that. That then went to the Supreme Court of the state of Colorado, and they said, oh yeah, yank him from the ballot. This totally applies. So now that went to the Supreme Court, and we talked about it. Our theory was the Supreme Court's going to try to find a way to either punt this off onto Congress or somebody else, and they're not going to address it. Well, they heard that case this week, and we kind of got a sense of what they're going to do. So let's see if we were right. I'll give you a hint. We were right. Let's see if that
goes. U.S. Supreme Court justices on Thursday heard arguments on whether former President Donald Trump should be kicked off the ballot in Colorado over his actions on January 6, 2021, when his supporters attacked the U.S. Capitol. The justices took up the case after Colorado's top court sided with a group of voters who sought to remove Trump from the state's Republican primary ballot under the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment. Section 3 of that amendment bars from public office any, quote, officer of the United States who took an oath, quote, to support the Constitution of the United States and then, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof.
All right, so the Supreme Court heard arguments about it, and the interesting thing is they never addressed whether or not the insurrection thing was true. They avoided that. The only judge that really asked about it was Ketanji Brown Jackson. And she made it pretty clear that, yeah, he committed an insurrection in her questioning. But the other judges avoided it. What they asked was, can a state do that? And should we allow a state to do that? Because under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the concept is not to allow the individual states the right to pick and choose, right? Because they were trying to keep Confederate, members of the Confederacy from running from office again, right? Because they didn't want to go back into another civil war. At the time they wrote that back in 1866, right? So that was the whole point behind it. So it was to try and take because states typically handle their own elections, but it was by putting in the 14th Amendment, we'd say, well, yeah, you can do that, but these people you can't have in. But they ignored that point and just said, really, it shouldn't be up to the individual states to ban somebody. That should be a federal decision. So what they're basically looks like they're trying to do is say this: well, you have to keep him on the ballot because a state individually can't do it until somebody deems that he's, did the insurrection and that he's not. But that has to be a federal decision. But we're not going to address that at all. So we're just not going to make a decision. So basically, by not making a decision, we're saying we're making a decision and letting it slide. So the 14th Amendment has no teeth now. And you can kick it back to Congress, but that's a stupid argument because there's an amendment. Congress has already ruled. So that's essentially what's going on.
Yeah, so, God, I really didn't want to be right.
I know. I wish they'd had stood up and did the right thing, but watch this. This is CBS.
I mean, we kind of knew they wouldn't. They're pretty much spineless. They're kind of a joke at this point.
Yeah, they're a total joke. But here's CBS Primetime, and they're going to talk a little bit about this.
Supreme Court heard oral arguments over former President Donald Trump's eligibility to be on the 2024 ballot. The case hinges on the so-called insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment. The challenge comes from a group of Colorado voters citing Trump's involvement in the January 6th Capitol attack. Jessica Levinson joins us now for more analysis. She's a CBS News legal contributor and professor at Loyola Law School, who I was watching the minute the argument ended. So, Jessica, I'm glad to have you here so I can ask you all those questions I was asking when you couldn't hear me. I'm going to start off in the sort of complicated, which is, in addition to the 14th Amendment, there was a lot of discussion about something called the Griffin case. Can you tell us what that is and why that was discussed so much?
So this is a very old case that was decided by a former Chief Justice of the United States. And by very old, we mean more than 100 years old. But the reason it was discussed is because it dealt with disqualification and it dealt with a criminal prosecution, but it dealt with whether or not Congress has to provide guidance in certain areas. And that was what a lot of the argument was about here. Before a state like Colorado can throw somebody off the ballot, can say you're disqualified, do we first need to hear from Congress? Does there need to be a statute? We heard words like self-executing when they were talking about the Griffin case. What that really means is, can the state act like Colorado did and say, I'm looking at Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and Trump is not qualified, or does a state have to wait for there to be a congressional statute, which is part of that Griffin case, and for Congress to say, states, you have the power, and states, here is some guidance.
And I'm going to come back to that in a second, but let me ask about another thing that was so much discussed, which is the idea that this wasn't a state power, as you said, that this might be something that Congress has to weigh in on. But states are given wide latitude to set the rules for federal elections. So how can states be given wide latitude to set the rules, but this is a rule that the state has to wait for Congress to tell it about?
Yes. So one of the classes I teach is election law, and there is this tension where, on the one hand, we do give states an enormous amount of power when it comes to designing election laws. We know that for people who've moved from state to state, you might have different voting ID laws. You might have different laws with respect to when you can vote, whether or not there's early voting, when you get your ballot, what the ballot looks like. But what the court said here is, we're talking also about the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment, ratified in the wake of the Civil War, was in part about saying, states, we don't trust you. States, don't deprive people of equal protection. States, don't deprive people of life, liberty, or property without due process. And also folded into that is this idea of the 14th Amendment is about the federal government saying, states, we can't trust you. And that's, I think, why the court was able to say, yes, states get broad latitude. Yes, they get a lot of discretion in the election context, but there are certain places where we have to speak with one voice. There are certain places where we need national uniformity. And this is one of them.
Right. The spirit of the.
So the interesting thing about that is, and she's right about all that, but the interesting thing, and go on to Patreon, I cover this a lot more in detail. But the interesting thing about that is, if you're looking for guidance from Congress, what they're citing in Griffin, right? We already have guidance from Congress. Congress impeached him for insurrection. And that's what Colorado cited, and that's what the Supreme Court in Colorado cited. He was already impeached for this. He just wasn't convicted in the Senate. Right? So it's kind of one of those, it's like it's the Supreme Court saying, well, there needs to be guidance from Congress, but that's not really up to us, so we don't have to decide it. So once again, it's them basically saying, we're not going to decide if there was an insurrection. We're not going to decide whether or not he's eligible. We're not going to decide what Congress found. We're not going to decide what was previously discussed or found. We're just going to say, look, this really shouldn't be left up to the states individually, which is a decent argument. But then the question is, well, then who handles it? And the Supreme Court's basically saying, not us.
Hot potato.
Hot potato. You take it. You take it.
Hot potato. Oh, wait, but you don't get to take it. Here, you guys take it.
Yeah. So that's it. I mean, that's in a nutshell, that's what it is. I mean, I go into more detail. Hillary Clinton actually had a pretty good take on this too. And there was a couple, Lawrence Tribe had some good takes. And so did, what's his name? Oh, I forget his name. Littman or something like that. It was another judge, had a really good take on this. But yeah, check us out on Patreon if you want to get more detail on that. But that's basically, it looks like they're just going to try and pass the buck. And they're just going to say, yeah, you have to leave him on the ballot until we hear something from Congress or somebody, whoever that may be, we don't know. So basically it's a law with no police to enforce it. You know.
At every turn, this just becomes even bigger of a mess.
Yeah. But it's basically nobody wants to step up and, grow a pair.
Yeah, everyone wants these highfalutin positions and honor and all of that sort of stuff. But when it comes down to actually doing the job that is associated with it, they don't want to.
Yeah. Everybody wants to say they're a Supreme Court justice, but nobody wants to do it. Yep. Nature of the world. But let's move into some more international stuff. Tucker Carlson. Okay, this will be a fun one. So Tucker Carlson, I don't know if you guys remember him. He had to fire his head writer because his head writer was a white supremacist and wrote for white supremacist papers and was on white supremacist. Yeah, and then he lied about the Dominion thing and then ended up getting fired by Fox News. And Fox News didn't even tell him he was fired because he was like, yeah, he left his show on like Friday and he's like, yeah, we'll see you Monday. And it was like, nope, you're not coming back into the building on Monday. He was gone.
Oh.
This was like the most efficient breakup ever. They just got rid of him. They just dumped him.
I mean, we could all take a page out of their book. Jeez.
That's how you do it. And then, so that was, so his last thing he said, his last sign off, the last thing he said on Fox News as an anchor was an ad for a TV show about eating bugs. That was that was how he left his professional journalism career, if you can call it. It was more of an entertainment show. So anyway, he's got a show now on X, which was formerly Twitter. So he's got a TV show kind of like our show kind of thing on Twitter. So he's been remanded to the world that we're in. The difference is this is not our career. So we don't really, we don't take it personally. So anyway, he did something amazing. He got an interview with Vladimir Putin. Right?
Oh.
So he went. So he went to Moscow and interviewed Putin, and it did not go particularly well for Tucker. So we're gonna watch a couple quick clips. This is really good shit. I mean, Vladimir Putin's an evil guy, but sometimes he does amazing stuff. I'll give him that. He was an ex-KGB, so
At the beginning of the interview, we asked the most obvious question, which is, why did you do this? Did you feel a threat, an imminent physical threat? And that's your justification. And the answer we got shocked us. Putin went on for a very long time, probably half an hour, about the history of Russia going back to the 8th century. And honestly, we thought this was a filibustering technique and found it annoying and interrupted him several times. And he responded he was annoyed by the interruption. What you're about to see seemed to us sincere. You're making the case that that Ukraine, certainly parts of Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, is in effect Russia has been for hundreds of years. Why wouldn't you just take it when you became president 24 years ago? You have nuclear weapons.
Yeah. So what ended up happening, we'll watch a little bit. David Packman covers this really well, so we'll watch him in a second here. Basically, Putin rambled on for 2 hours about just when he went back to literally like medieval times and talked all the way up and just did this long Russian propaganda history lesson.
I mean, you kind of can't blame him for being like, are we being filibustered here? What's going on? I mean,
but here's the difference. Tucker Carlson is used to like he's not a very good journalist. He could have attacked it more, right? But you have to understand, in the U.S., we constantly attack our political leaders. And that's actually an important thing that we do. And it's important for our journalists to do that. They're the fourth estate, right? We constantly need to be criticizing them. But when you're a dictator like Putin, nobody criticizes you to your face. Nobody asks you tough questions. That's why Putin never does these interviews. But he did it with Carlson because he knew he could push him around. And that Carlson would be basically his little bitch boy. And so David Packman covers this. Really, it's really funny. It was just Putin basically talks down to him the whole time. So this is just some clips from David Packman.
I have to talk to. And the way that Putin shows his complete and total disregard for Tucker Carlson is he gives him a 1-hour history lesson. Putin knows everything about Tucker Carlson. It was clear he was briefed extensively about Tucker. Knew Tucker tried to work for the CIA, makes fun of him for that. We'll get to that. But Putin deliberately, knowing that Tucker wants to ask questions and get answers, spending an hour slowly, excruciatingly boringly, trying to, I guess, address the history of the region, and Tucker with a frozen expression on his face of what the hell have I gotten myself into? So we're going to pick it. We'll just look at a little bit of each of these sections. You're going to hear the voiceover, Putin speaking in Russian, and you'll hear voiceover in English. This is about a half hour into Putin's history lesson. And Tucker tries to interrupt, and Putin just makes fun of him and says, no. You want to interrupt and make this an entertaining show. I thought this was going to be a serious show. Tucker laughs because he's completely emasculated by Putin.
Characterization of what you said.
Я понимаю, что мои длинные диалоги, они...
I understand that my long speeches probably fall outside of the genre of the interview. That is why I asked you at the beginning, are we going to have a serious talk or a show? You said a serious talk. So bear with me, please. We're coming to the point where the Soviet Ukraine was established.
So Putin says, listen, you told me this was going to be serious, and I'm now getting to the point in my history lesson where...
Did you see how uncomfortable Tucker is? Because you got to remember, he's used to like U.S. politicians. He's not used to a guy who kills journalists he doesn't like.
Right. Well, and okay, not that I'm trying to defend Putin or Russia or anything else, but you know, when he does an interview with a Russian journalist, like he just says whatever it is that he's saying. There's like, this isn't like nobody's coming after him and pushing him for whatever or this or that, or you know what I mean? So
no, because he has
I don't know,
because he has state TV. The journalists are always the people he wants, and they always when they interview people like on the street and stuff, it's always really awkward because it's like, oh no, I love Putin. Putin's great. I think he's the best. I think Ukraine is evil. Now will you guys release my family from prison? I mean, that's kind of how it goes off. Because the guy basically has everybody's, at gunpoint. But Tucker's doesn't have the balls to stand up to that. I mean,
Later, Putin has not answered a single question from Tucker, and he then gets to the presidency of George H.W. Bush.
So this is like 50 minutes, and now he's finally gotten to the 21st century, but he's still 20 years ago.
By Bush Jr.'s father, Bush Sr., to visit his place on the ocean. After was invited.
It's amazing to see Putin do this to Tucker, because Tucker's not used to interviewing the leaders of countries where there isn't a free press. Maybe in some loose, ostensible way there is, but journalists get killed in Russia when they say the wrong thing. And it's like when Castro wanted to speak for 8 hours, and everybody sat there peeing and pooping their pants as they listened, because he says he's going to speak for 8 hours and you'd better listen. If Putin wants to do a 2-hour history lesson and not answer a single question, Tucker is going to sit there and he's going to take it. 42 minutes into Putin's history lesson, they've reached the year of 2008.
It says that Ukraine is a neutral state, and in 2008, suddenly the doors or gates to NATO were open to.
So we're slowly moving forward. After 45 minutes or so, they were close to 20 years ago. And then 46 minutes into the history lesson, Tucker gets made fun of by Putin for having wanted to join the CIA, which Putin says, and I understand it's sort of a serious organization.
With the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand.
At this point,
look at the look on his face. That is fucking terror right there. Now he's sitting there thinking, oh my God, this guy knows fucking everything about me.
On Tucker's face is, oh boy, how much research has Putin been doing into my personal background?
We should thank God they didn't let you in. Although it is a serious organization. I understand.
Oh boy. We should thank God they didn't let you in.
Well,
what?
Well, that's more of a dig at that's a dig at Tucker, and it's a dig at the CIA. You have to remember, Putin started his career as a KGB officer. He was the enemy in the Cold War. I mean, imagine if we had a CIA assassin as the president of the United States. That would be a fucking trip. That's essentially what Russia's got. They've got a Cold War spook running their country. And that's the problem. Is he's doing all this history shit, he is still stuck in the Cold War. I mean, he still thinks it's like 1985 and he's in East Berlin. It's fucking insane. But the whole time, Tucker just got his ass handed to him. And then, of course, Chris Wallace, who used to work on Fox News and now is on, I think, CNN, who worked with Tucker. Chris Wallace had to take a dig, and I just thought this was fucking hilarious. So we'll wrap it up just with Chris Wallace. We'll sell it for it.
Tucker Carlson showed up in Moscow this week to interview Vladimir Putin. It turned out to be anything but an interview. Putin droned on for 2 hours and 7 minutes, while Tucker sat there like an eager puppy. Occasionally, but rarely, he got in a question, like this one about the power of the deep state in Washington.
It sounds like you're describing a system that's not run by the people who are elected in your telling.
That's right. That's right.
But more telling than what Tucker asked is what he didn't ask. Nothing about why Putin invaded a sovereign country. Nothing about targeting civilians. Nothing about Russian war crimes. A reporter can ask Putin a tough question if he wants a real interview.
What's this?
Why is it that so many of the people that oppose Vladimir Putin end up dead or close to it? But apparently, that's not why.
So Chris Wallace did interview him years ago, about 6 years ago, and he did ask him a bunch of tough questions. And Putin didn't answer him. And Chris Wallace came out. But Chris Wallace came out looking like a badass. Right? Because he asked him tough questions, knowing full well that he might not walk out of Russia alive.
Right.
But Tucker Carlson? That was his whole fucking interview.
What a pansy. My question is, what did Tucker Carlson think was going to happen when he went in there to interview Putin? Like, what did he actually think was going to happen? Did he think that, did he go there with the intention just, not really to ask stuff? Or did he somehow think it was going to be entirely easier than what it was, that Putin was just going to give it to him easily? I don't know.
Well, he didn't want to, I don't think he wanted to ask any tough questions to begin with. I think this was it was all propaganda. It's all the Fox News shit that he used to do, where he's playing to the Trump base and that crowd, and he figures, oh, well, Putin and me, we're one of the same, right? But he doesn't realize, no, Putin dragged you on television so he could kick you around and show the Russian people just how awesome he is.
Right.
Which is why Chris Wallace has never been invited back.
Right.
Because that went bad for Putin, and they never aired that interview in Russia. But they got him, and you saw the look on Tucker's face. You know they aired that on Russian television. Look how terrified these so-called tough Americans are.
Right.
He basically gave Putin everything he wanted out of the propaganda there. It was just a fucking shit show. I want to do this, though, with the whole situation in Ukraine, and we sort of talked about this, and I'll get more into this on Patreon if you guys want to check it out. But agriculture. So this is, what is this? This is Ukraine. What's the global economic impact of Russia's invasion? And this is the Economics Observatory. So Ukrainian GDP growth is plummeted since they were invaded, right? So poverty, food insecurity, agriculture is down, right? Decline in Ukraine's agriculture sector has been especially harmful. Ukraine and Russia were the biggest producers of agriculture and food globally. Before the war, 55% of Ukraine's land area was used for arable farming. And now that a lot of it's been burned from the war. So part of the reason your food prices are going up is a lot of stuff we could get from Ukraine, we can't get anymore. So the prices are way up because there's a shortage.
Right.
Talks about sanctions. I get more into that and how that works. Russia, on the other hand, too, and this is important if you're investing and you're doing what we call emerging markets. So Russia's one of them. India, there are a few of them. But Russia has had to change its economy quite a bit because their car manufacturing is a fourth of what it was before the war started, because all the Western countries that built cars there, that had manufacturing facilities there, they all pulled out as part of the sanctions. So Russia's had to change what it's doing. So now it's making more basic kind of stuff for war kind of, basic metals, basic materials, basic medical supplies. And that's sort of their economy's wrapped now around their little war machine. And whatever they can sell to whoever, China, Syria, whoever. So, I mean, they're really sucking money. So, yeah. Anyway, I get more into that going forward. But yeah, that's just crazy stuff. I mean, also check out on Patreon. I'll go into sort of what's going on with oil markets. And I'll also cover what's going on with General Motors and how that's going to affect sort of the stock market as a whole in your portfolio. And then we'll go into some of the inflation stuff. Inflation was not as bad as we were thinking it was going to be. I mean, it wasn't as great as we wanted, but it's not as bad. So we can skip all that stuff. But let's. You want to take a quick break and then get into some clips, and then we'll jump from that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. All right, so we'll be right back, everybody. So we're back. Now we're gonna do some fun clip stuff. Are you ready to do some fun clip stuff?
Oh, heck yeah.
All right. Well, we have to do this. So last week we did a short clip of Tim Pool, right? Who's a middle-aged man. Not that we're knocking it. We're both middle-aged. He's not that much younger than we are.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah,
Some of us are
Right.
maybe not going to identify that way.
Right.
Speak for yourself.
Yes, I've been 20 for the last 20 years. Anyway, so, but his whole thing is his whole right-wing hustle grift thing that he does is he's trying to seduce younger people, right, the Gen Z kids, into sort of conservative, that sort of political landscape. That's how he makes all his money. And like 80% of his audience is male, which isn't shocking. And most of them are teens, early 20s. And we had pointed out that he wears a beanie all the time because he's bald, to hide the fact that he's bald. And basically, we got a ton of hate comments and hate emails from his followers. So,
wow.
I just want to let the Tim Pool followers know, because our audience got the joke. You guys didn't. We weren't making fun of his appearance. We were making fun of the fact that he's a middle-aged man that spends all day thinking about how he can appeal to teenage boys. And then you know, then how he's going to basically flip on them when they don't do what he wants, kind of thing. It's really creepy. You know, he's a grown man. He's got a gun and a sword stapled to the wall behind him, and he lives in a compound thing with a bunch of other guys, and they have a skate park, and it's just, the whole thing is creepy. I mean, it's just weird. But that was kind of the joke, is basically everything he's selling is bullshit. And they don't do any research or read. They're just placating to that audience. And most of that audience is like the disaffected, angry young man, the incel kind of guy. And it's like, I get it. I was a kid once. But, you know, the joke is that you grow out of it. Hopefully. Hopefully you don't end up like Tim, where you're pushing 40 and you're still doing this shit. Because he's not taken seriously by other adults. He's like that guy that graduated high school last year but still hangs out there all the time because they think he's cool. But everybody his age tries to avoid him. That guy.
Right. But he might be managing to sell a few of the kids that are still there in the high school on the idea that he's cool. However, even some of the high schoolers are kind of like, why are you hanging out here?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the nerdiest senior is still a senior, so they have, yeah. And it's just funny to me because he's got, you know, the fake gun and the fake sword. And it's like, I own a gun, but I'm an ex-cop. And I have a sword, but that's because I come from a samurai family. My father gave me a sword as a gift. It's a cultural thing. But you know what I don't do? I don't staple it on the wall behind me. Like it's a trophy. I mean, it's just.
I don't know. Maybe you should.
I should, yeah. Yeah. Mine are actually real, though. You can't leave a sword unsheathed stapled to the wall. It'll ruin the metal.
I mean, that's fair.
Those things are really expensive to polish. Anyway, I wanted to get into this just to get a sense of who this guy is, right? And how dangerous what he spills is. So there was a guy in May of last year, 2023, in Allen, Texas, and he shot up basically a strip mall. And he was a neo-Nazi. He had swastika tattoos and shit. And he was also what's called an incel. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a online group, but they're called incels because they're involuntarily celibate, which is just a fancy way of saying, I can't get laid.
Okay.
It's really embarrassing because they have, I didn't know much about them. I had to go look some of this up.
No, I don't either. Like, well, I don't know why you need a name for that. Why do you need a name for that? What am I missing about this whole equation?
Well, I don't know why you'd be out advertising, I'm angry at women because I can't get laid. It's like, well, that doesn't seem like a woman problem. That seems like a you problem. But Tim Pool plays to that. I mean, he gets these like pickup artist guys on his show and blah, blah, blah. And incels are weird because they have like their own like jargon. Like, I guess like normal looking guys they call normies. Good looking guys they call chads. And I guess if you're a good looking, yeah. And then if you're a good looking black guy, they call you a Jerome, which is A, racist, and B, is weird because in Africa, there's a country called Chad. It's ironically filled with a bunch of Jeromes. So why don't you just call them all Chads?
Okay, I do want to say my brother's best friend in high school was Jerome, and Jerome was pretty good looking. So, I mean, I guess there's something to that. Hi, Jerome, if you're one of our viewers. I mean, probably
Lacey
he's
wants a
not,
call.
but if he was, hey.
Give her a ring.
I think he's married with kids. I feel like he's not available. But you know what? He still is a good-looking man. So there you go.
All right. Well, for the incel kids, if you guys are watching this while you're writing your hate stuff, just so you know, subscribe to our show and write as much hate comments as you can, because that's the only way we're going to learn.
Yep. Teach us a lesson.
Teach us a lesson. You got to subscribe and watch our show every week and write as many hate comments as you can, because that's the only way we're going to stop. Anyway,
repetition is a valid form of education
and protest. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I will give you guys some advice though. If you are trying to meet other people of the opposite sex, the same sex, or whatever, the best way to do it is to be interesting, which means, you know, reading books or getting a skill, picking up a hobby. Simple advice. You want to meet a lot of attractive women? Take a yoga class. Take a cooking class. Take a spin class. Learn to play an instrument. Comic-Con. There are a ton of gorgeous women that go to Comic-Con. And we know they're into role play. So I don't know what the issue is here with meeting other people. I don't get it. But just to go into Tim Pool. So just to give you a sense. So May of 2023, because I got on a tangent there. Shooter in Texas with a neo-Nazi incel. And here's a quick article that I just want to scroll through because this is interesting, because this is why these guys like Tim Pool are so dangerous. So this guy got into the shooting, and it talks about it here in the article as we go down. But here we go. So he referenced white nationalists. Here we go. Garcia also referenced the white nationalist nonprofit Vidare. So these are all the people that radicalized him, right? In his social media history, blah, blah, blah. Radical terrorists and others who have committed acts of violence have frequently frequented England's site and the Daily Stormer, which is a neo-Nazi paper. Dylan Roof, the man who murdered the 9 black churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina, frequented its comment section. New Mexico shooter William Edward also frequented the site. Peyton Guerin, blah, blah, blah. So Pool is one of the guys who's hosted a variety of radical right-wing figures on Timcast IRL. So Tim Pool is who we're talking about. This guy was a big fan of Tim Pool and posted a bunch of Tim Pool shit. And Tim Pool has neo-Nazis like here we go. Jack Prosobiec, Alex Jones isn't a Nazi, but Nick Fuentes is. Right? Tim Pool actually had Milo Yiannopoulos on with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West talking about the Jewish problem at one point. So Tim Pool brings these guys on. So these disaffected young men who are incels, they're bitter, they're angry. And then what does he do? He brings on all these racists and sexists and pitches that as this is the problem. This is what a real man is. And, you know, this is how you be a Chad, right? You got to have like the Maserati and the platinum card and treat women like shit. And that's his whole spiel. But the joke is, and our audience got it, it wasn't that he was bald. Samuel L. Jackson is bald. The Rock is bald. Vin Diesel is bald. Bruce Willis is bald. There are a lot of bald guys who are badasses. Nobody's knocking you for being nobody cares that you're a middle-aged bald guy. Our point is, own it. That's cool. Wearing a beanie and pretending to like you're 20 when you're really pushing 40 it's a little pathetic. That was our joke. We weren't making fun of it.
It's kind of like there was this store, I think it was called The Rave, where you got all these like $5 like clubber clothes. It's like being 40 and going into the rave, like
Right. I don't know. It's Hot Topics.
Listen.
Is Hot Topics still a thing?
I think it's still a thing, but it's very large on t-shirts. I feel like you can be 40 and go in and buy the t-shirt.
Yeah. Maybe get like an ear cuff. I don't know if that's
maybe.
I don't know what people wear. I don't know. You kids today and your poodle skirts and your rock'em sock'em robots.
Oh my goodness.
Watching Leave It to Beaver up at all hours of the night. I don't know. Youngins.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Leave It to Beaver. That's a fresh reference. So anyway.
Go polish your samurai sword.
Not a euphemism, huh?
I didn't say show it to me.
I don't do that.
I said go polish it all by yourself.
Yeah. Anyway, I just think it's funny because it's like, I have it because it's a gift. It's not like, it's not like I would actively go out and buy one. And it's a gift is more of a cultural thing. It's like some people get their kids baptized, right? It's not, it's not anything but that. But here is Sam Cedar and Emma Vigilant on the Majority Report. Now, they've done a really good job of making fun of these guys. We just sort of dabble. This is like an ongoing project for them that they're really good at. So here they are, and they're going to talk a little bit about Tim Pool and Tim Pool trying to prove how cool he is and how he's one of the youngsters.
Some idea about themselves, but their whole notion of selling it undercuts the premise of what they're trying to sell about themselves. How do I express this? You know what? Instead of expressing it, let's just play this clip. Clip number 11. Could not do a pop shove it. Basically saying I was terrible at skateboarding, I didn't actually know how to do it, and I was bad. Now, why would they do that? Why would they lie? They don't want someone like me who's challenging their lies to be seen as culturally influential or in any way having some kind of skill or cool factor, right? They don't got to think skateboarding is cool. A lot of people don't. My point is, we here at Timcast work out of a large mansion with 2 indoor skate parks, an outdoor skate park for the most part, and music recording studio. And there are pro skaters and rock stars who work here. Now that should be cool factor, right? MTV Crib style. In fact, when we put up the video doing a breakdown, a tour, maybe we should do another one. It got like 600,000 views overnight. This is something that would inspire people. A regular person who says, how can I be successful? How can I live the dream? So they have to lie about it and say things like it's a cult or a compound. They have to make sure they control it so that you don't see a path forward, a successful path in the world that we are building.
To come hang out at my compound. With the skate parks, which are cool.
Yeah, they're definitely cool. They're super cool too. 2 skate parks indoors. Yeah, this is what a 13-year-old kid's idea of like a cool house is. I mean, I thought about
She nailed it.
He is so the guy who turned 21, who has no friends his own age, going back to the high school saying, hey guys, I can get you alcohol.
Right.
To try to get the cool kids in the high school to think he's the cool guy.
Yeah.
Like he's totally that guy.
Yeah. And that's the joke.
That was super weird.
That's the joke. And for Tim's followers who, ripping on us once again, remember to subscribe and write hate comments because that's the only way we're going to learn to appreciate Tim Pool. But our joke is, you guys bought into this, and it's a joke. It's a little sad, but that's the truth. The truth is, yeah, he makes a lot of money, but he makes a lot of money. He lives on he's a mansion. It's like a compound. He's a guy pushing 40 who lives with a bunch of other guys and skateboards and plays pin pool and does his little podcast. And that's his whole existence. And his whole podcast is geared towards, how do I attract more young boys to watch me and think I'm cool? It's just sad. I don't know what else to say.
I mean, listen, I don't know if I have anything to add on that.
No, that's pretty much all it is. I mean, that's the whole spiel. But we'll move on from him to, I had to do this one. So Patrick Bet-David, who's also kind of one of these guys, but Patrick Bet-David's like, God, he's in his 50s or he's 60. I don't know. He's old. But he does this whole thing too, where he's like, I'm the finance guru, listen to me. And he's one of these Tim Pool guys where Tim Pool's been on his show, and I'm sure he's gone on Tim Pool's show and stuff. Anyway, Bill Maher, who I don't know if you remember.
I do.
Yeah, Bill Maher's he's always been a weird guy. He was really popular when Bush was president and Obama was president, basically criticizing the right, but he's always been kind of a weird libertarian, and now he's gotten this whole anti-vax bullshit thing, right? But he had Patrick Bet-David on his show, and it's pretty clear, and we'll watch a clip here, it's pretty clear Bill Maher doesn't know who he is. Because Bill Maher doesn't follow that genre, right? And the only reason we know who he is because we do a show where we sometimes make fun of these people because they spew off this like financial advice that's just terrible. So he has Patrick Bet-David on, and basically Bill Maher's a little drunk on his podcast that he has, and basically has no regard for Patrick Bet-David and what a douchebag he is. And it's really funny. So we're going to watch a clip of that real quick. So this is Luke Beasley, and he covered this, but it is just embarrassing for Patrick Bet-David.
Bill Maher brought a right-wing podcaster named Patrick Bet-David onto his Club Random show. And there was a moment that I saw circulating that I want to play and then discuss. And it's a moment where a drunk Bill Maher asks PBD Patrick Bet-David who he's going to vote for. And his response is indicative of a larger phenomenon that I want to discuss. He strangely squirms and avoids directly answering the question for a while, even though, and I've seen a good bit of his podcast, he's a Trump fan, for sure. But again, he avoids saying that for some time. Here it is.
I'm always about this. I do know. You're supporting Biden, though. Of course, because we only get two choices. I mean, what is so hard to understand about bad and worse? They forced America to take the vaccine bill. 70% Americans took the vaccine and they didn't want to take it. A lot of them didn't want to take it. Wait a second. When did the vaccine come about? Under Biden? No, under Trump. No, it didn't. It came 2 days after election was over with. 2 days after election was over with, Pfizer announced it was not under Trump. Oh, they intentionally kept the vaccine. You're right. After the election, so they gave the victory to right. But Trump was not anti. Trump was like, I created the vaccine. I don't disagree with you. I agree with you. I takes it as a victory. I'm on the same page with you. Okay, but there's a difference. Though. Yeah, this is the one difference, Bill. But may I say this? May I say this? And then push back. Here's the difference. You know what the difference is? How many times have you heard Trump get on stage and brag about warp speed? We saved 100 million people's lives, right? Can I just ask you a simple yes or no question? Yeah. Not exactly yes or no, but who are you voting for? I'm voting for whoever allows me to make decisions more and not somebody that decides what's good for me or not. Bro, we're not in a debate here. No, the left. I asked you a yes or no. Vaccine. Wait a second. The state of California and the industry you're in force you to take the vaccine. So you don't know who you're voting for? I'm voting for whoever allows me to have more freedom with the choices I make. And you don't know that yet? It's definitely not going to be Biden. Well, then it would be Trump, wouldn't it? If it's between the two choices? What? But look at you. Are you kidding me? It's not even a close call, but the fact that you just can't own it is very weird, man. You know, this like, who are you voting for? Well, the Constitution says it's two words, Trump, Biden. I'm voting for Biden. I'm owning that. Do I think he's perfect? But no. But I don't think it's like that. Not even. I don't think it's like that. I don't think it's like that. Well, just say you're for Trump. If a person I don't dislike you for your. I don't dislike. Bill, if somebody watches my podcast, they're gonna know who I'm voting for. Well, if somebody watches a podcast, they're gonna sit there. But how odd that you can't just say it? Because to me, I'm voting based on values. I'm not voting based on. Okay, but we know what the values are of Biden and Trump and their policies are. We know everything about left them. Is about force. The right is about choice.
So here's the thing about it.
So you mean the right is going to let me choose what to do with my body?
Oh yeah, totally. That's their
Because
whole
they're
thing.
all about choice.
Well, the thing about it, nobody forced
The
anybody.
right wants me to choose who I marry too.
Yeah, nobody forced anybody to take the vaccine. There was no mandate that you had to take it. What they did do is they allowed employers to say you can't be here unless you're getting tested or you have the vaccine because you're a liability. So he's talking about taking away freedom from employers to protect their employees and their own interests. So, I mean, he doesn't get it. But the point is that he's playing the same grift. He has to pretend like I'm not biased. I'm not on one side or the other. I'm not getting paid by the right to say these things, even though I'm getting paid by the right to say these things. That's what the whole deal is. He's got to pretend because he's the gateway to the neo-Nazi shit. He can't flat out say that. He's gotta pretend like he's not. So he can't flat out come out and say, well, no, I'm voting for Trump. That's why he won't say it. Because then later on, if somebody says, well, you voted for Trump and this happened and it was all shit, he's got to go, well, yeah, I was wrong. But he can't do that. Right? But the whole thing is like, I'm a values guy. He said shit like that. Like I think Bill Maher asked him a question at one point. I didn't watch the whole thing. I just watched a few clips. But he asked him a question at one point, and Patrick Bet-David said something like, Bill Maher, are you a results guy? Do you like results? And Bill Maher was like, yeah. I mean, no, I like it when shit doesn't go well. Of course, everybody. This is like, have you ever seen like when they used to do like Amway and it was like Herbalife, these pyramid schemes, right? And these guys will get up there, and that's what it is. It's like one of these weird corporate seminars every time I hear this guy talk, where like he's trying to sell you a pyramid scheme, which is funny because he made all of his money with a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme to sell insurance. But he's one of these pyramid scheme douchebags. And that's why it's so funny to me, because that's his whole spiel. And that's all they got. Man. But yeah, him and Tim Pool and all those guys. I just wanted to touch because it's such a joke. He can't even answer the question. He's got really tense. It's a simple question. You could just say, look, I don't want to tell you who I'm voting for. You could just say that. You don't have to tell anybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say I support people in their desire to like maybe not discuss it or not tell people who they're voting for, because there have been eras in time where I was like, no, I don't really want to talk to you about who I'm voting for. But then I'm not trying to play both sides when I do that. You know what I mean? Like
right.
It's like he's trying to sort of be a marketing campaign for a side and pretend that's not the side he's voting for.
Right. Like, that's the needle he has
What are we doing here? What are we doing?
But that's the needle he has to thread to keep the money coming in. Is I'm unbiased. I'm actually very open and I'm very thoughtful and I put a lot of effort into this. I don't just buy the propaganda shit. When in fact, well, no, but I'm selling you all the propaganda shit. So he's got to thread that needle where he can't say, well, I don't want to talk about it. He's got to say, well, no, it's pretty clear who I'm voting for. I just can't say it out loud, you know? You can't ask me those questions. I plead the fifth, Your Honor. I mean, that's what this whole thing was. Oh, man. Well, let's see. Let's do a quick Dave Ramsey and then we'll get out of here. We'll do a couple minutes of Dave. All right. So we'll just wrap up with this.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. So Dave Ramsey, what do we got here? Should landlords feel guilty about raising rent prices? I don't know. This one was sent to us. We'll have to check it out. So.
Oh, someone sent this to us.
Yeah. So the Dave Ramsey game, if you guys have never seen this before, is Lacey and I Lacey tries to guess what Dave's going to say, and then we explain to you why it's stupid. And it's never failed. You can send us random clips. It never fails. All right, here we go.
But you know what? I like when they send them to us because then it's sort of a challenge. It's sort of like we get to see it a little bit blindly.
Yeah.
You know.
So we'll check this out. So should landlords feel guilty about raising rent prices? What do you think he's going to say?
Well, I mean, I guess I kind of want to hear the caller first,
All
but
right.
before I hear the caller, I'm interested and curious because Dave owns so many rental properties that I can't imagine he would be on the side of anti-rental increase.
Probably not.
But he might kind of be on the side of, you know, thinking that there's a cap to what is reasonable to raise. I'm going to guess he's probably got some sort of value on that, but I'd like to hear what the actual question is, because I can't imagine the caller question is literally, hey, do you think landlords should increase? So I don't know. I want to hear the question.
Well, I think he's going to be on the side of increasing whenever you can, but I think he's going to try to find some way to morally justify it. That's going to be total bullshit. That would be my guess, because that's what he's done in the past every time he gets a question like this.
Today's question comes from Dan in Washington, D.C. I'm a landlord who owns multiple rental properties. Over the past year or two, rent prices have seen a big increase. This is great for a landlord, but not so great for the tenant. I know I need to raise my rental rates to keep up with the increased overhead costs. However, this causes direct hardship to my tenants that have been good tenants for the past few years. As a Christian, this is hard for me. I would feel bad if raising rent caused them to have to move after they've made the house their home. I did not get into real estate to subsidize people's living expenses, but I also didn't get into real estate to displace families either. I love investing in real estate, so I don't see myself exiting this field. So I'd like to hear your advice on how to balance this equation.
It is sweet that you've got a big heart like this, and that's a nice thing. And you're not exiting the landlord field. And so you are going to have to learn to balance your faith with business practices that are not dishonoring to your faith. Treat other people like you would want to be treated. Okay. I lease a building for Ramsey Solutions that is an office warehouse. We're not the owner of it. About 5 miles from where we sit right now, from our buildings that we own. And the lease is coming up for renewal. If the guy raises my rent to market rate, why does that make him a bad Christian? That was a passive-aggressive question. Answer is, it doesn't. Okay,
That's it. See, I told you. Now it's a religious question.
Okay, well, in all fairness, the person that was writing in, identified them in a religion and actually did want that kind of cooked into the crust of the answer. And that's not all that different than what I expected, you know, him to say. I mean, I knew he'd be in favor of the increase, and he didn't say anything about like the sort of price gouging, you know, sort of thing, but he did talk about balance. You know, there are some places where there literally is like the government kind of intervenes on that and says how much year to year you actually can increase. I happen to live in one of those places, you know, where it comes out every year. This is the percentage of increase that is allowable, et cetera. You know, to keep people from saying, and suddenly your rent is $500 more expensive, you know?
Right. Oh, okay. Well, here's a good example. Let's see. Okay, this is just Oregon. This is the Oregon State Bar. So let's see what they say. Let me zoom in so it's a little bit clearer. Rent increases. There you go. Landlord-tenant law. When can a landlord increase rents? A landlord is not allowed to increase a tenant's rent during the first year of the tenancy. Okay, so there's laws restricting this. Okay, I don't know. I've never done that sort of thing. So After the first year of the tenancy, the landlord is allowed to increase the tenant's rent by delivering to the tenant a written notice at least 90 days before the rent increase will go into effect. Generally, a landlord can raise a tenant's rent only once in a 12-month period. So then it goes through how to give notice. Statewide rent control.
Yep.
The state of Oregon limits how much a landlord can increase a tenant's rent. Every fall, the government releases information on a measure of inflation called the Consumer Price Index, so the CPI, that everybody uses. This inflation measure affects the maximum allowable rent increase for the coming year. In any given year, a landlord can raise a tenant's rent by the lower of the following two limits, 10% or 7% plus CPI. So if CPI is 1%, then you can only raise it 8. But if CPI is 4 or 5%, you can only raise it 10. 10% is still pretty high. Because you're also talking about, right now, we finally have like good wage growth, but wage growth is averaging 4%? And your rent's increasing by 10. So it's a way to gouge people that don't own property. In a bigger sense of the concept. But Dave's talking about it like, well, it's the market. Like, it's the market forces, right? Well, what causes the cost to go up? Right? Maybe it's increased cost to you, but you could raise the rent just enough to cover those increased costs and still maintain your profit. Or you could leave the rent where it's at, but then you'd be taking a lower profit. Right? So at the end of the day, you're the one deciding to raise the rent.
Right.
So you can't do this magical, like it has nothing to do with you. Your hand is forced. God intervened. Bullshit.
You know what? I am going to a certain degree agree with the way I interpret something he was saying when he refers to what the market forces are. I feel like part of what he's saying is, you don't, like, if this is your business and, what you are doing for a living is you are landlording for a living, just because you don't want to be doing harm to people, you don't need to be leaving people's rent untouched so that you are giving rent below what the norm is for the area. Like, if a normal 1-bedroom is renting for 1,000, you're not obligated to like leave it sitting there at 700 because you keep not raising and keep not raising and keep not raising. I feel like that's where the whole market thing comes into effect, because if landlords don't increase the rent and everyone around them they become the person that's below market. Yes, it would make your place easy to rent out if you had a vacancy, but at the same time, I think the point is, he's saying that people are not obligated to leave it like that.
No, my thing about it though is there's a need base around that. It's like food. It's one of these inelastic sort of things where you have to have shelter, right? Unless you want to live on the street and be homeless, right? So it's a necessity going forward. So it's one of those things where there's also kind of a situation where, let's say I'm renting the apartment and the landlord raises it by 10%. That's the max they can raise it by, right? Well, I have two choices. I can either move or I can eat the 10%. Well, to move is going to cost me money because I'm going to have first month's, last month's. I'm going to have time to find a new place. I'm going to have to then pay to move all my stuff or rent a truck or, whatever. Right. So now that's going to cost extra money. So I'm getting bled either way as the renter. So it's coercive no matter how you spin it, because I'm stuck in a position where you're forcing me to either move and spend money or stay there and spend more money. Right. Now, I could understand, reasonably speaking, we're just talking about on a moral aspect, right? If that's the question, then it's like, okay, my costs went up by 2 or 3%. So I'm going to raise rent 2 or 3% to cover my costs. Right? That's something that's reasonable. But if I'm sitting there going, well, yeah, but the guy next to me raised his 10, so I'm going to raise mine 10. Or maybe me and the other apartment owners talk, because we're all part of the Chamber of Commerce. And we all know each other. We all get together like little oligarchs and go, well, what are you raising yours by? Well, I'm going to raise mine by 9. Okay, well, let's all agree we're all going to raise by 9. So they're all forced.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I'm laughing about the idea that you think these are all guys that know each other at the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, quite frankly, they might, but I'm a landlord, and I don't know any of the other people that are landlords anywhere near me.
But you rent one property.
I don't. It's true, and I use a management company, and they send me their recommendations every year, and I pick one of their recommendations and say, yeah, okay, let's do that, and then we do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But one property. This guy owns multiple properties. Dave owns multiple properties. So they do have a bit of a monopoly, which allows them to do that. So when I'm sitting there saying, yeah, they're getting together and talking about it, or they're doing it, it's because Dave has a corner on that market. So if Dave raves at 10, who else are you going to go to? And if the guy next to him is like, well, Dave's raising 10, so I can raise 10. Right? So that's where these housing prices get out of control. And what is the number?
Well, you know what? Speaking of that, I mean, this is, slightly to the side, but that's part of why what you looked up existed in Oregon, because when I first turned my place into a rental property there, those guidelines, those were not rules in Oregon. That didn't exist. And there came a point in time where in the Portland metropolitan area, people were finding themselves renters with suddenly getting a $500 a month rental increase because of just sort of the craziness in the rental market over there at the time.
Right.
That wasn't a thing that happened to my property. The management company I use has always been very consistently keeping the increases about the same. It'd be like $50 this year, $50 this other year. Will stay the same whatever year. But there were people in the area that were getting jacked up by that much, and that was why, the local government did jump in and say, okay, hold on, we're going to have a huge crisis on our hands here if we don't do something about this.
Right.
Which is interesting. I live in New York City, and that's something that's existed here, for a long time.
Oh, well, here's this. So check this out. Tennessee, where Dave lives, does not have rent control laws limiting the amount that landlords ask for rent. So, wow. So this really puts another spin on it. So Dave could sit there and go, I'm going to raise it 20%. Right. But then what does he say? His whole thing is, well, it's not you gouging them or being evil. It's just the market. But what determines the market? Well, if Dave raises it at 20 and Dave's the biggest renter or landowner, then 20 is now the market. That's the standard. So he's creating the market and then saying, well, but it's just the market. Like it's the hand of God or something. That's my point. It's bullshit at the end of the day. It's just him trying to morally justify being a slumlord. That's all it really is.
So, I mean, I gotta say, good job to our viewer, because you definitely have Duncan and I on at least slightly different sides of that. Although I will agree with you in like a smaller market and one that doesn't have any sort of rent control policies at that, it does give one big cheese the opportunity to sort of control the market. So like, especially like in a smaller sort of town, like, yeah, well, that maybe is harder to do in like a larger city, but it could be easy to do in small to mid-sized towns if you got like one big person and they kind of end up controlling the market. Then that piece of advice kind of goes,
Well, my argument is that you need stuff like rent control. Otherwise, it does get out of hand, and it becomes monopolistic or oligarchical, and they just start taking advantage because they have you at wit's end. They have you at the point of a gun. Right? And that's what's happened in the past, and we've seen that happen before. And it's impoverished a lot of people, and it's part of the reason you have such a divide now between the rich and the poor is because I own all this and I can set the price. So if you don't have a government to come in and regulate that and go, well, no, you can't set it that high, then nothing's stopping me. Right? I would argue, and I would bet you $1 million that if we asked Dave, how do you feel about rent control? Dave would probably be against it. He'd just say, "Oh, but no, you just do it by the market."
Against it because he would not want the government controlling his wallet. Just like, I mean, he feels that way about Social Security and taxes and anything where the government has their hand in his wallet. He is not a huge fan of.
Yeah, but he's all for socializing his profits. He's all for taking the government insurance on his properties. He's all for the tax breaks on his properties. He's all for all the benefits and the estate tax and all that stuff and the restrictions on estate tax. He's not for estate tax, but I mean, barely anything's going to, cost him on estate tax. It's not that much. But that's my point. He's all for socializing his risks and liabilities, but he wants to privatize his profits. That's the bullshit. That's where it's hypocritical. And to sit there and say, well, you're not a bad Christian for doing that. It's like, well, isn't that kind of counter to everything Jesus fucking says in the Bible? Didn't Jesus say, give away all your property? Come with me? So it's,
I don't know. You could write into Dave and ask him about that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The other thing I want to do, because it's funny, just because it cracks me up, because I always hear this. So they do the Christians the do unto others as you would want done unto you bullshit. That was added centuries later by the Catholic Church. That section of the Bible wasn't in any of the original stuff. And what it is it's actually a ripoff of Confucius, who said it in 500 BC. Right? And Confucius actually said it correctly. Confucius said, do not do unto others as you do not want done unto yourself. Because see, he made it a negative. It's a liberty situation. Because if I do unto others as I'd have done unto me, well, what if I like having my genitals grabbed? Does that mean I should do that to everybody I meet?
I knew that was going to go somewhere weird with you.
Well, it has to, because if I like getting punched in the face, does that mean I should punch everybody in the face? Because I would want to do unto others as I want them to do unto me. That's why it doesn't make sense. It's stupid. The Catholic Church screwed it all up, and then people take it as gospel. I mean, it just cracks me up.
Well, on that note.
Well, anyway, that was pretty much our show for today. So, Lacey, where can everybody catch you?
As always, you can catch me at mysensewithsense.com. That is where you'll find articles by me, workshops I do, courses that I teach. If you want information about any of that, or if you want to send us some other clips,
yes,
good job in getting Duncan and I at least sort of in separate corners. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, not really. But...
Well, I wasn't 100% in yours, so I don't know. I had my own side, I guess.
I don't know.
Anyway, send us some stuff via email. We always like those, and it's kind of more fun when we can go at it a little bit blindly because neither one of us have to pick it out because you sent it to us.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can email us, and where should they do that, Duncan?
You can email us at gossipfinancead@outlook.com. Also, check us out on Patreon coming up. I'm doing some videos this week. It's a little sparse right now for videos, but I got a bunch of stuff coming up. So this week I'm going to cover GM and their move to hybrids after their horrible stock route for the last five years under was it Mary Barra, who's the CEO. I'm going to cover the inflation report for February 13th and how that's going to affect the Fed and how it's sort of affected the market. Plus, I make fun of Larry Kudlow because he's an idiot. and then I'll cover more on the Trump and the Supreme Court case for the disqualification and what's going on with that. So, yeah, check it out. And then we've got some stuff on whether or not to pay off your house early or to save the money and invest it, and how you would calculate that and make up that decision. And then I've got some stuff on how to solve credit debt and the different strategies. So check it out.
All right, so go check that out. And in the meantime, Duncan's going to go polish his sword.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we will catch you next time.